The most trusted agent isn't the one that's always right. It's the one that doesn't always surprise.
If you start from building, like how do you make it easier and easier? People aren't buying technology, they're buying solutions.
We've come a long way since RAG 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
As the tech's evolved, how have the workflows evolved?
We always knew that the models were going to get really good and the intelligence was going to get really good. And so what are the different tools similar to an engineer that you need to do legal work? And then the customers will just tell us the use cases.
Welcome to Builders, a video series from Kleiner Perkins. Each episode, Lee, Marie, and I sit down with founders and operators building the products and tools that will define the next decade of technology.
We keep it simple. Fried chicken, beer, and raw, unstructured conversations with the people that we call when we're trying to figure out what's next. These are the conversations that we have behind the scenes at Kleiner Perkins, and now we're excited to share them with you. When I think about what's actually being built in AI today, like what AI application companies are actually scaling, especially inside of enterprises and real companies, I think both of your companies come to mind, Sierra and Harvey. And so I thought it'd be really interesting to kind of dive in to the specifics of like how your products get built and how you work with customers and what's really going on and what's really being used in AI today. Mm-hmm. So when you think about which customer workflow to own, like how do you prioritize?
So we started so of course, we're focused in legal, but we started in transactional corporate work specifically, which is, if you're creating a fund, like a private equity fund, or you're buying a company, or you're funding a company as a VC, there's a certain amount of legal work that needs to happen to, form entities and create this work. And the reason is because you can have a context-complete workspace within itself. You don't need to go out to the world. You don't need to, go out to and get other information. As an example, like if you're doing diligence on a company and, my client as a law firm is buying a company, the main thing that you need to actually look at is the data that that company has. For example, is there something in the supplier agreements that this company has that's gonna be a big risk to us? And so generally with AI and particularly enterprise AI, you need this context-complete workspace. So you have all the context needed to actually make the decision. And oftentimes transactional work is very high volume, very repetitive. The poor associates spending weeks and weeks combing through manual documents. And so very ripe for disruption, a lot of mundane work, and you have all the data that you need. And so early on, we would go to these law firms and say, hey, we can help you with diligence, we can help you with M&A. And the two things we needed to build was, back then doing Q&A over FI documents was like a mind-blowing thing. And then doing like extraction on FI documents. So built that, and then one connection to the SEC database where you need to reference. And so just doing those two, you can basically, with the intelligence even that we had 2 years ago, you can basically do a lot of that transactional work or at least augment it. And so, since then, we've of course expanded, but that wedge was, I think, crucial to proving value. And I think one thing also worth saying is a lot of people think that you need this whole corpus of case law and whole data to make it legal work. You do for some cases, but most, particularly transactional work, is very preference-based and not fact-based. It's like, what is the risk in these set of contracts compared to what I have in my company? That is a very subjective thing that someone has to come up with. And so it was very ripe for the LLMs even early on.
Sierra's, of course, building agents in like the customer experience space, right? This was before my time at the company, but when the company was getting started, it's very much like focus on kind of like that like conversational design and keeping like the main thing. But I think one thing that's also super interesting is like on an ongoing basis, every time like we work with new customers, how do you have like an agent in place for that customer incrementally and figure out what to work on, right? And that's so dependent on the business. For example, Sonos is a company that we've been working with for a long time, right? And internally, like one of the metrics that they track, like it's like a cross-functional metric that they measure, which is time to music, which is actually pretty interesting because when you think about like the customer experience, like what people can call in about, or like, can be over chat, phone, like what email, like WhatsApp, whatever it may be, the reasons might be like infinite, but how do you like actually work with the customer to understand like what is like a really good, like high impactful use case for Sonos, for their customers as well, in terms of like frequency, reach, ultimately the time to music metric. And then I think similar to what you were saying is like 2 or 3 years ago, I think the cool thing was being able to like like RAG was like kind of like new, right? And it's still being like optimized and so on. But like from there on, it's like, how do you actually focus on like that true like agency and get the agents to actually take actions, right? So kind of like fleshing out these use cases, it's like, okay, like one thing for like time to music is I could help like Lee Marie order a new set of like speakers. But how do I actually like hook up to the right systems? How do I have all of like the access to the knowledge and like the policies of like my entire product catalog? How do I actually like make like the tool call or the API call to actually like process that like new order and ship the speakers to you and so on? So I think it's just kind of like finding that like CX is a very broad space. So it's like even like within CX, like you have to make these decisions on like almost like a daily basis, right?
I feel like if you can help me with my Sonos speaker setup, like that's AGI.
Yeah, I know, like Wi-Fi troubleshooting, yeah.
To read all my speakers. Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so those are kind of the first workflows. I'm actually curious, as the tech has evolved, I mean, we've come a long way since RAG 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
As the tech's evolved, how have the workflows evolved in more detail?
One part of it is just at more scale, and then one part is like new types of workflows. So, for example, we started with this like 5 document Q&A that was magical 2.5 years ago. But if you're doing a very large transaction, like the big one in news recently is like the Netflix Warner Bros. Acquisition. There are thousands to tens of thousands of different contracts and documents that you have to analyze. And so how do humans do this today, and how can we do this at scale? And then more so, how can you help verify actually the information is correct, and how do you help the lawyers actually verify? So we've gotten much deeper in this transactional type of work. Like, the agent goes in and extracts like 70 different terms from 10,000 documents, and then says, here, the confidence is low on this one. Hey, please, associate, please look at this. And so more scale, more work in that space. And then new types of workflows. What's been cool to see is, Harvey, we always kind of knew that the models were going to get really good and intelligence was going to get really good. And so we really focused on how do you kind of basically have the IDE for lawyers, like what are the different kind of tools similar to an engineer that you need to do legal work. And then the customers will just tell us the use cases that happens. And so basically legal work is like a document editor, it is a spreadsheet, and it is search, like searching my internal data or searching external data. And so we built this general platform, and organically so many different use cases started coming up. People say, hey, I use this for investor presentations. I use this to generate, it's crazy. People use it for like review cycles in law firms. It's just like so many different use cases. I think what we're starting to do now is we focus a lot on this, like, how do you make this partner or associate really productive and really effective? Now we're starting to move towards more kind of organizational productivity. Like if, rarely in a law firm or even corporate legal is the work actually just the individual doing it. It's like very collaborative. Multiple people are reviewing, multiple people are checking. And so the workflows we're starting to get into is like the associate does one part of the work, passes it on to the next associate, the next partner. They review it, they verify it. And so how, internal to a law firm and then external to a law firm, how can we start to make this a lot more multiplayer? And that's really, where a lot of, I think, AI is going, is not just the individual productivity, but wide spanning these different workflows that multiple people are involved in.
I think like from our perspective, it's like, there's just like workflows all around, right? So it's like, how do you make like a CX team and an operations team and even a development team possibly like working within CX like extremely successful? And like one thing I found helpful is actually to think about this in terms of like, the way you think about like the software development lifecycle, think about the agent development lifecycle. So if you start from like building, like how do you make it like easier and easier for teams to build agents, right? Like defining what are the goals and guardrails that go into like agent building. Ultimately, it's all about like, it's an art and people are still kind of like learning all about like context engineering and figuring out what like kind of like that right like balance is, right? So how do you make that like super easy from like a pure like product perspective, and also kind of like couple like no code solutions with like our SDK as well and so on. And then kind of like from there, it's like, next step is like testing, right? So we've added a lot on like that front in the last like, like 12, 18 months and so on, in terms of like simulations, testing at scale, making sure people have kind of the available like tools in the toolkit to like just like gain confidence before they even release the agent. And then kind of like on the other side, like once the agent is live, how do you basically have like, the one nice thing is like you can like keep like adding AI to a lot of this to make a lot of these workflows powerful, right? So you have all of this like rich conversational data. It might be like over voice, over chat, and so on. And how do you let like a CX team actually glean like insights from that, right? So like one example is we've built this like deep research style tool where you can like go and ask like questions of all of your conversations. So you can be like, show me all of the conversations that might have resulted in like be ultimately like the agent transfers to a human, or like one where, like maybe it's a happy part, like customers called in like frustrated, and then that sentiment kind of like improves throughout the course of the conversation. And you can kind of like continue asking questions. It becomes a bit more obvious as to like, where's the agent good? Where do you need to hill climb? What's kind of like the next use case you should go and figure out, and so on. So I'd say like a lot of our workflows actually just like tie back to like kind of like tightening that entire like life cycle.
Actually, on that, just kind of resonates, the agent development lifecycle, I think resonates a lot. Oftentimes, I think actually AI kind of breaks traditional product management, where traditional product management says pick a user, pick their use case, solve for their use case, make it super narrow. With AI, you can actually broaden out the number of use cases, number of ICPs, number of people who actually can use it if you just give them the tools, because we're not going to know what exactly people build or what types of use cases the agent solves. And so we've also kind of created this no-code workflow builder that basically combines deterministic kind of repetitive patterns with probabilistic LLMs. And we've been insanely surprised at how much it's been adopted, what types of workflows people are using. Now people want to run X thing when I get an email from a client for a credit agreement, run this workflow, run all these risk analysis off of it, and then give me some score. And so we would have never kind of known that was a specific thing, and it would have been taken a lot of effort to actually build for that specific use case. And I think one lesson is just first, just open it up to your customers and then open up a wide funnel. And then, you can see what they use and then get deeper in specific things that, are more valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Your comments about no code, this is a bit of an aside, but it reminded me of the big trend around FDEs, forward deployed engineers. Is this a trend that you guys are currently employing at your companies? Do you work really closely with them? Do you despise them because you should be productizing everything? What's your reaction to this new trend of FDEs?
So I used to be an FTE
really?
10 years ago. I was at Palantir for 3 years on the forward deployed engineering side. So I feel like I got like a flavor of that before it was kind of like the cool new thing around the block,
Yeah.
And I just feel like it's like I don't know if you, but I feel like it's such kind of like a strong lever to just deeply understand your customers. And ultimately, especially in this day and age, people aren't buying technology, they're buying solutions, right? And everything from our business model down, we charge based on outcomes and so on. It's all about are we actually just building and helping our customers build a better customer experience, period, right? And for that, I think the FDE model actually works really well for just being super aligned with customers. At Palantir, I'd go on site to customers all the time, really understand what the problems want, and figure out, okay, this might be an industry we're working with. How do you actually scale some of these, right? So it's not just for one customer, but you're actually scaling this and taking maybe even insights back to kind of the platform side of the house. And so now it's CRM on the other side, which it's just such a fun collaboration, because you're working with other PMs and engineers who you're speaking on the same wavelength. You can kind of can go deep with specific customers and collaborate on solutions with a lot of rich first-hand knowledge. So I know I'm a huge fan of the model, and I think more companies should do it. Yeah.
Cool.
Actually, one quick question on that. Do you deploy forward-deployed engineers for every customer today? And is it part of this kind of way that you deem success for that customer?
It definitely varies quite a bit, but kind of all customers have some degree of support from our team, of course, right? So ultimately, I think you can't get, I think there's this misconception sometimes where if you have an FTE team, you don't need to build product. You need to do both, right? For example, with Palantir, continuing that example, you have Foundry and this entire suite of products around it, right? And so similarly at Sierra, the no-code building products help a ton to kind of get customers directly on our platform and so on. You can't get away, the product still needs to be super easy. But I think giving customers access to these experts in the room, especially when you can almost think of them as an extension of the customer's team, right? Especially when things the entire art of context engineering, we were speaking about, is so new. People don't know what the best practices are, right? So if you can have someone from a company that's able to guide you and steer you in the right direction, share best practices, common kind of pitfalls and so on, it's just very helpful. But you also of course have to productize the solution, right? I don't know if that answered your question.
No, that definitely answered it. I think for us, we have a software product that you can basically buy off the shelf, and we do SaaS pricing essentially, and you can buy and we enable you on it. I think as we've grown, to be really successful, I think we've started to actually do this, forward deployed motion. And I think there's like kind of two tiers. One is like, and I think ultimately it depends on who is the profile that's going to be most effective. It's like the first tier is ultimately a lot of these customers just want a forward deployed lawyer. It's like a domain expert who can go in, who understands the product, who understands their legal domain, and has tremendous empathy for it, and says, "Hey, look at this cool thing I hacked together with our agent builder. It solved this particular problem that one of your associates told me. Look at it, and let's get it deployed." And so, a lot of actually the majority of our forward deployed work is these forward deployed lawyers who are experts, and then there's another kind of higher tier, which is like, okay, forward deployed kind of engineers and PMs who actually build some custom solution. We found that most effective with enterprise teams. So private equity places like Blue Owl. We just announced Walmart. Like where they have a lot of kind of legacy kind of integrations, data, APIs to actually tap into to get the most out of Harvey. That's where you kind of need engineers and PMs. And of course, there's both between the forward deployed lawyers and forward deployed engineers. There's a feedback loop so that everything that they learn, it gets back into the product. But yeah, I think we've kind of settled on these different tiers. And I think sometimes a lot of companies are eager to say, hey, forward deployed engineers, throw them in a problem, let's figure it out. And it's like, you have to be a little more nuanced on that. It was like, who is the actual person the customer is actually going to resonate with, and what is most effective at scale to be able to do that?
I'm actually curious, when you think about FDEs at both of your companies, what are some either traits or backgrounds that you found make really successful FDEs? Because as more and more companies do explore hiring something like an FDE, kind of regardless of what they might call it, I think a lot of people have the question of what are the most successful people in these roles? What do they look like?
I think I have maybe like a couple. One, I think it's just like technical curiosity, and I'd maybe just like expand that to product, FDE or not kind of thing today, because like everything is changing so quickly. And I think maybe not even technical curiosity, just like curiosity, because like you have to understand the business, understand the customer, understand their customers, understand how the agent is performing in all of these aspects, right? So I think that really goes like curiosity, and maybe also like hunger, I think like go like a really, really long way. From like a background perspective, I actually think more like a traditional product or engineering background is actually super helpful in because you come with like a lot of those first principles, right? Like, let me understand the problem, let me work back from that and think through a solution with the customer, bring them along, build all of that trust and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that definitely resonates, kind of being super curious. And maybe a few things to add is, I do think people have to be like commercially curious and commercially minded, because I think you often have to pick the use cases or workflows that are going to be like the most bang for your buck. You don't want to kind of waste time doing something that's not going to be super valuable. And I think that does require some instinct to say like, okay, is this valuable for the customer? Is this valuable to the end client? Is this the best use of Harvey and our team's time? And so making that determination, I think commercially curious is important. And the other thing is, maybe this is baseline for most people, is just being super AI native, like being able to be on site with the customer and vibe code something to show them like right there and then is, I think, like that scrappiness, that kind of AI native nature is really important. And maybe this is controversial, but I don't actually think it has to be an engineer. Like it can be like a traditional engineer. It could be like someone who's done a lot of solutions roles, who's been deployed with customers before, or even some like a PM with a software engineering background. If they're committing production code, sure, it's like helpful to be a software engineer. But with AI, with like talking to customers, you can get pretty effective outcomes just by having someone who has that mix.
Actually, on that point, I actually think there's also just like a lot of fluidity, I think, between kind of like what's like a forward deployed PM or like an agent PM and an agent engineer. And those two roles, the lines are honestly like super blurry. I actually think they've always been blurry on the forward deployed side. So like people who just have like the mindset of like getting stuff done and like nothing is going to stop me. I'm just going to figure it out and learn and ask for help along the way and things like that. And like people who can like skew in different directions, because you might need to build a relationship, you need to like help build the agent or steer the customer in the right direction, you need to understand the problems, all of the things that you were also mentioning, right? So like people who can be like more like dynamic, I think also just like very, very good fits for the role. Yeah.
And Sachi, how much are you interfacing with these FDE teams? Like, is this like a weekly thing where they're giving you feedback constantly with the customer deployments?
All the time, to be honest. I think like the in-person like helps a ton with that as well. Honestly, all the time. And of course, I have like, like my set of people that I'm like, from like day one of the company, I've been like getting feedback, and certain customers I work more closely with as well.
Yeah.
Hey, like this is a new idea. I'm not quite sure about it. I want to like bounce that idea back. So it's kind of like a two-way direction as well. It's a great sounding board for like someone who might just be sitting like 2 desks away from me.
That's cool.
There's also like, you can still like talk to customers, right? So I still like, at least like on my last team, we had this like rule of thumb where every PM should talk to at least like 5 customers a week. So I still try and like stick with that like personally, where like there's nothing substitutes like going directly to the customer too, right? So
I like that. I'm curious about setting a roadmap. I mean, we're kind of on quicksand here a little bit, but like how do you do that? Is it impossible to set a 1 year, 2 year roadmap? Is it everything have to be 3 months? Like what comes to mind when you guys think about setting roadmaps at your companies? Because you both have hundreds of people now.
This is definitely a challenge as you scale and in the environment we're in. I think one thing to remember, which I always remind my teams about, is you have to constantly re-earn product market fit, like all the time. Like customers' expectations change, the new model comes out, like a competitor launches something, and sure, you'll have all these customers, but it's like constantly shifting expectations. And so what you say is going to happen today is and tomorrow is probably not the thing that's going to win the customer in 3 months. It's fully going to change. And so I think road mapping, 1 year is a little impossible at this point, but I think we started, when I first started, I was the first PM, there was 8 engineers, we were just planning daily. I think we've gotten it to the point where we can predictably plan like 3 months out now, and we really have to because all the teams that are involved in everything. And so we plan 3 months out and really focus on big boulders, not small pebbles. Like what is like the one big thing that we're going to do that is going to like shape the month or the quarter of the team, and intense focus on getting that one thing right, because all the other stuff will change. Well, there's KTLO that comes up, there's a bunch of like Thrash that comes up, priority change, whatever. But as long as you plan that one thing really right and you focus on building it, selling it, marketing it, you can be pretty sure you're going to do the right thing. So I think that's one thing. And the second thing is knowing and kind of having a theory of mind for where the models and model companies are going more so. I always say, tell all the PMs on my team, like, if you are running the roadmap at Anthropic, OpenAI, XAI, whatever, like what would you do? And really putting yourselves in their shoes. And it's like a lot of kind of brutal lessons learned in not anticipating that. One example I'll give is we spent like a month-ish building our own kind of deep research functionality. And then OpenAI just drops like go through deep research, and it's much better than anything we built. It can tap into the knowledge that we already have. And it was mind-blowing for our customers. And so you kind of have to both manage their roadmaps and your own roadmap. And so like, for now, it's like memory and connectors are the two big things where, you can be pretty sure that, these companies are going to create some architecture for how you do memory and how you give a continual context to the models. And, same thing with connectors, like enterprise search, everyone's doing it. They're probably going to expose some parts of it. So I think it's like anticipating that and making sure you're not taking bets that are going to be wasted work or, not super useful. And you're focusing on unique things that you as, Harvey or the company is going to be able to do effectively.
That's cool. You think Sierra is similar, 3-month cadences?
no, I honestly so many things to say. It's a tough problem.
Yeah.
One, like just like separating out like vision and roadmap becomes so important, and like thinking about like, okay, what are the outcomes I actually want to go and achieve versus the things I'm going to do to actually achieve that outcome, right? I think like more traditional kind of like enterprise software, right? Like past companies and so on, like there's typically like a gold standard in place. You kind of know what the gaps are of that gold standard, how you want to find your wedge in the market and stuff. I think with companies like Sierra and Harvey, like there is no gold standard, but we're trying to build that, right? So it's like really important to have like a vision, but be like super nimble and flexible. So you can kind of like ultimately get to that, but like be super grounded in like customer reality and so on, right? And like as the scale of the business grows, the number of the customers grows and stuff, it's really hard to support kind of the needs of everyone, right? So you have to find kind of that like common denominator, what's the most impactful. Comes back again to a previous discussion around like building trust with customers, right? Like why are we not doing like A? It's because like we're doing B. Do you think that's useful? And the answer might like hopefully is yes, right? Like if you're kind of on the same page and like transparent about these things. I think like tactically, when it comes to planning, we try and do this like focus on like what are kind of like the goals, what are like the big bets across the company and so on, like you were mentioning. And then like not even 3 months, we try to keep it like super tight, like less than that, right? So just like trying to like plan continuously. So at every like, monthly or like 6-week cycle or whatever it may be, or kind of like just like reevaluating and sharing out, yep, I'm still working on this stuff, or like, no, I've like learned this new thing, which is probably the case. And so now I'm going to like, instead of this, I'm going to like shift like 5 degrees and this is my reason for that, right? Honestly, if you're not doing that, it's like something is probably off given how quickly things are moving, yeah.
Holy cow. Does it feel like thrashing going that fast for you guys?
It feels thrashy. But I think it's like, if you're gonna work in AI, if you're gonna work in these companies, like you just have to accept that. That's the reality. I always give an anti-sell when I pitch candidates that like, it's thrashy, there's a lot of stuff happening. We may pivot on a dime because something announces. And if they're still super excited, then it's a great fit, right? But yeah, I think it's just like, whether you're a founder, whether you're a PM, whether you're one of these companies, like you just have to accept that the reality we are in. The other thing that actually you said resonates a lot is, I think you sometimes like, you may just like plan in this like silo and like figure out what to do. But a lot of times you learn a lot just like bringing customers along. Like, again, kind of going back to vibe coding, you can show mocks of like, hey, we're thinking about this, and we're doing this right now because we're doing Q1 planning. Hey, we're thinking about this direction. What do you guys think as customers to go to market? And then we just started exposing our roadmap to our customers. And that's immense amount of feedback of like, are we going in the right direction? Are we not? And I think bringing your customers along in that journey has been effective, not only to like build the right thing, but also it kind of bring the whole org and the whole company along. Because if, hey, we say we're going to do X thing and the customer's like, no, do like X plus Y, it's not thrashy, it's just customer feedback and customer learning, right? So yeah, I think bringing your customer along is super important.
And Aatish, I mean, you and I originally met at Scale, and I feel like we learned a lot of those lessons when we were there, because I mean, pivoting was such an important part of Scale's journey. Yeah. So it's even to the point where now some of the AI application companies I work with will say, hey, I just want to hire all the ex-Scale people, because I know that that's a group that's been selected for listen very deeply to customer feedback, be comfortable with pivoting, like even giant pivots over the course of many years. So
I mean, on that, I think one big lesson I learned at Scale was follow the frontier customers. Like, who is asking for the thing that seems crazy like 6 months before everyone else asked for it? And applying that at Harvey, we've, for example, one of our customers that we work closely with, Paul Weiss, they asked for deep research over like 5 different tools and 6 different other knowledge bases. And it's like deep research for doing something like drafting a motion to dismiss, which is like, you have to look up case law, you have to look up your precedent, you have to get context from the user. And we were like, that seems impossible, it seems crazy. Like, are people really going to trust Harvey and AI to do this? And it turns out they were right. And everyone is asking for these long horizon tasks that are basically like drafting whole 300-page documents. And thankfully we listened to them and started building towards that direction. And so yeah, I think it's just like listening to these customers who are thinking ahead and identifying 1 or 2 people who are like that.
I think we're also at such an advantage right now because you can like prototype and like get something out in like hours or days as opposed to weeks or months, right? So even if you have like an inkling or like some signal internally from a customer, from another product, whatever it may be, you can just like go and get feedback on that like so quickly now.
When you think about the model layer, so whether it's what models you use, like if you do any fine tuning or reinforcement learning of the models, how involved are you in that? Like how much do you think about that? Because that ultimately, I mean, will drive capabilities forward.
I don't know. I think I saw this on a tweet or something earlier, but I think it's important to teach PMs and engineers and everyone like this idea of model sense. It's like actually understand what the models are good at, and just not even like evals and look at like metrics and stuff. Just like vibe. Like, are they good at the thing that you're struggling with in your work? Like, here's the document, write the PRD or whatever, and really building that kind of model sense is important to know where the models are growing, what they're good at, what they're not. So I think like as a product builder, you just have to be super involved in that, because then once you know what they're good at, what they're not good at, then you can build all the scaffolding, product, and everything around it to account for the weaknesses or the strengths. And I actually think like UX is still underrated as a way to kind of work around different things with the model. Like, for example, one of our tasks is to do extraction, for example, on a particular set of terms. And it's like if you have the model actually one-shot that, it's going to get it right, maybe not get it right. But if you just ask the user before you do the task that, hey, what terms, and here's 2 examples I got from the first document, is this right? You'll get a like infinitely better answer that way once you do that. And you only really know that if you try it out, in multiple ways. So yeah, I think UX and product building are learning the model layer is super, super crucial to making sure that works.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think similar to just like any other piece of the stack, like just being super clear about like what matters, like what are you trying to optimize like the agent's performance for? So you kind of need to like pick the best model for the best task in that case, right? So for example, one of our customers is Safelite, like a glass company. So if like someone's broken into your car and you need to like get your windshield replaced or something along those lines, you would call Safelite, right? And if you're like in this like stressful and like rare situation that's happened, and the agent is like terrible at like transcription and synthesis because we haven't picked the best models, or like haven't done enough like fine tuning on top of the providers, like, and the agent can't like read back out to like interpret your license plate number, that's just going to be such a bad customer experience, right? So things like just like even like super high level and like having them like goals from there on, like, if it's voice, which is obviously like the most popular channel right now, things like latency of response matters a lot. So how do we optimize for that, right? How do you optimize for transcription quality, synthesis quality, like accuracy of these complex things like license plate numbers and birth dates and things like that. And then kind of like similar things like through and through the stack, right? You might want to like quickly like online, like live in the conversation, classify things for like safety and abuse related issues and stuff. So speed matters a lot, but accuracy also matters a lot, right? Probably more so than speed in a case like that. Like how do you balance all of those things? I think it's like figuring out what you're optimizing for and being super clear about that. And then especially when I'm working with like research teams and so on, I think can go a long way, yeah.
Yeah, I think latency is actually a really important point because like you can add more latency if you add more UX, for example, and then probably get higher quality. And so you only really understand that if you actually understand like how quickly the models can do something, or add more model calls to add more latency, and then just show a cooler UX as it's doing its thing or giving input. And so I think all these factors, latency, quality, UX, are just like one of the toolkits that like a product person can use to have the best product.
And some of it is also honestly like vibes, right? Like if like the experience, like if you call me and like say I'm an agent and you're like, hey, like Sachi, where's my order? And I'm like, I'm looking that up for you. And I immediately go like, here's your order. Like, why did I say I'm looking that up for you? I should just tell you where your order is, But if it's like really like a complex thing and I like need to buy myself more time to like go and do it, then maybe I'll like tell you, hey, like I need like a minute, I'm looking up these systems, all of these things, and like bring you along. But like things like that, and that's like, it's, just like, it really is like a little bit of an art and vibes in some cases, and it's like hard to quantify, but like we're all learning, right?
Do you have like a PM come up to you and be like, the vibes are just really good on this model, I think we should move forward?
That happens a lot. That happens all the time. Like, Gemini 3, like, one of our PMs who works with our AI team was just like, it's game changing. We should use it for editing 300-page documents. The vibes are great. Like I just tried it on one thing and it worked. And it's like, I think sometimes like AI people, product people, like you want to get super scientific about all these things. Oh, what is the metrics? What is that? And are the vibes good? I think that oftentimes that actually has, again, if you trust the person saying the vibes are good and they've built up that theory of mind, like I much rather trust that person than trust all these 700 evals that we've done. Like we have, one of their early employees, Julio. He used to be a lawyer, and he now works with all the models to understand it. And it's like he's the best person at the company to tell us if a new model from any of the labs is good at some X legal task. And if I literally just message him, vibes good, he's like, vibes good, and then I'm like, okay, ship. And so. That comes from practice, theory of mind, and trust building. I'm not saying vibe everything, but I think sometimes PMs get into this mode of just like this percentage is up higher or whatever. And it's just like
we like created this new role at Sierra. It's called a voice sommelier.
No way.
That's cool.
It's actually both like a voice maker and a sommelier, so it's like even more fun. like on the Chick-fil-A topic, for example, like one of our customers has like a large southern customer base. And having an agent with a voice that had like a slight southern accent actually just like boosted like all of their metrics, like CSAT, etc., like quite a lot. Wow. And so it's just like more relatable. And like there was like, in hindsight it seems obvious, but there was like nothing to tell us that, right? But like you can like still experiment and like run whatever 10% of your traffic on a different voice, for example, or like on like a different model or whatever it may be, and like see what the data looks like, you know?
I mean, that's a great example. Like, we did this in the UK where the model, we don't use voice as much, but the model responds with UK spellings, like, you know, color with the U or customize with an S instead of a Z. And people noticed like instantly. We just changed that for the UK just to test it out. People instantly used it, retention went up, engagement went up. Wow. And no eval would have really told us that. And it was just like, hey, tell the model the user is British and respond in British English, and it works.
Yeah, this is also like, I think like one of the most fun things about working in this industry is there's so many little like details to think through every day. Like no like 2 hours are the same, you know, so it's like super fun right now. Yeah.
So let's say tomorrow like Gemini 4 comes out. Is it just like red alert, let's go test this thing out, kick the tires and then ship? Like how quickly do you guys have to incorporate this stuff? Are customers demanding it, or you're like, we got time, we have months, et cetera?
Definitely not the latter.
So it's like days, you kind of have to do this, turn it around.
Yeah,
okay.
We may or may not end up using kind of like the latest models because like we have kind of course like our eval frameworks for the common classification tasks, like response tasks, things like that, safety checks, all of these things. And so we would evaluate really quickly based on our frameworks, tweak the evals if we need and so on, and then kind of like make a decision. Do we want to kind of like onboard maybe like a few agents as design partners, some percentage of traffic, see what that looks like.
I see.
There have been instances when new models have come out and we've decided like, you know, we've really thought hard about like, should we even use this, like given kind of like the state of where things are.
Yeah, I think it's similar for us. I think, you know, we're in the fortunate position to be able to work with all the labs, you know, at the early stages when they're creating new models and giving them evals and exchanging feedback. And so, you know, we have some notice, at least a week notice or so before, you know, the public does, and so we can prepare for it. But, you know, as soon as it comes out and it's launched, like our customer, like the vocal minority of customers who end up being the most important buyers and most important users really, really want all the latest stuff. And so we end up having to test it, evaluate very quickly. And even if we don't put it kind of in one of the core product or core flows, we put it in like a model selector that we have for our agent builder where, you know, you can build models with different agents and stuff. And so default is like there and always there. And then the ideal case is it's like game changing for a particular workflow or a particular product surface area.
Cool.
I guess when you think about evals and ML infrastructure internally, how much do you build, how much do you buy? This is something I talk about a lot with companies.
So I think there's like eval and then maybe like technical infrastructure. I think eval, the biggest thing we found correlated with customer happiness, retention and everything is just lawyer human preference. Like, you know, we have a bunch of lawyers that we've recruited all around the world who we give different models to and different outputs to, both doing kind of side-by-side rankings, absolute rankings, using my scale knowledge there. I think, you know, our preference generally has been to own a lot of that ourselves because it's almost like, why would you, eval is so crucial to what you do, why would you offboard your product management to something? It's like you wouldn't offload your whole design team to, you know, to another company. So eval, I think we have a strong preference in owning. And then there's all the kind of software tools that go into like doing auto evals or infrastructure or databases. And generally, I think early on, we took too much of the angle of let's build everything ourselves because of security requirements, because our customers are super tough if we introduce something. I think as we've gotten bigger and kind of more trusted, we can bring on more vendors. Like, you know, for shout out to Reducto, we use them a lot for doc processing. And incredible product, incredible team. We'd much rather have that whole team fully focus on that doc ingestion, doc processing problem than occupy our team at solving that. And so I think those are examples of, I think we're starting to use more other products for our infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, similar. We're doing a lot in-house, especially on kind of like the eval front, the testing front, all of that, because it's just so kind of like tuned to like the use case and the modality and all of these angles, and like we were chatting about the voice thing earlier, like what really makes like a good like customer experience, right? So I don't like that's that, like, and the fine tuning as well, like those aren't like layers that we outsource at all, but like we're definitely in the, hey, like let's kind of like build out the agent development lifecycle, make it super easy for kind of like our audience that we're going after and so on. We're like in that phase. So kind of steering a lot more towards like building more and more like in-house right now, yeah.
It's very interesting to hear you guys have a lot of similarities despite Harvey being more of like a vertical segment with like Copilot, increasingly Pilot, whereas Sierra is more horizontal and fully automated, trying to do as much as you can end to end. Maybe this is like a nice segue into like just trust, because I imagine very quickly you can lose trust. What comes to mind when you think about engendering trust and making sure net new customers like really and deeply believe in what you guys are doing and like you'll be successful for them?
Yeah, there's a few things that we have productized, and I think it goes also just like back to first principles of like deeply understanding your customer's problem. If it's like an insurance company or like a bank or might be in a highly regulated industry, they might have a separate set of concerns than someone working in like, you know, different industry, right? For example, so like starting with that, and then like in terms of actual product, there's kind of like steps along, I guess, like that agent development life cycle that we've like built and like continue kind of working on, right? So like one example, like before you go live, even like when you're live, we have like a suite of simulations running. You as a business, like, you know, following through with like the Sonos example, Sonos could go in and kind of like add their own simulations, customize those to the needs of their business. So it lets you be like, okay, these are kind of like the types of persona that typically interact with my company. These are the scenarios that they're in. But I'm also going to check if like the user tries to like do something devious. So like, I don't know, like talk about like sensitive topics that have like nothing to do with Sonos and things like that, right? So you'll try and like catch all of that stuff within like simulations that you can think of as kind of like these like pre-release like checks, and then you can like run them anytime you're making, you know, a change to the agents. You have kind of that regression testing built in as well.
Cool.
And then like once the agent is live, it's like on every like message that's coming in, and also when the agent responds, we're doing like, you know, on average probably like 20 or so like inference calls, right? So we're running kind of like online kind of like supervisor models, right? So if the user is saying something and the agent is responding, we'll both kind of like understand what the user said, and the supervisor will kind of like judge that. And then similarly with the agent's response, right? And we're like kind of like parallelizing all of this. So while like the reasoning layer is coming up with like, you know, the next tool to call or the actual like response to the customer, you have the supervisor also running. And so like the response will never get sent unless the supervisor also gives the green light, right? So we have kind of these like online checks as well. And I think the last thing, which is actually quite interesting, is like at the end of like every conversation, we also kind of like do like another analysis, right? Like what happened in that conversation, what was sentiment, and all of these things. And then you can build in like things like safety checks and stuff after the fact, in addition to kind of the per turn checks. So you have like more time and can kind of do like a more thorough analysis. And then like big part of trust just comes from like transparency, right? So how do we get all of this data in the hands of our customers, use kind of like these like the insights product that I was chatting about earlier as well. So customers can go and filter down like, hey, the agent is never going to be perfect. Like what are instances that, you know, I know like this, it might not be like a safety issue, but maybe like an area that they need to improve regardless, and kind of glean insights kind of like on all of those like millions of conversations that might have come in, right?
It's cool.
Yeah, I think there's like two parts to trust. There's like product and then brand. I think on the product side, you know, one lesson we've learned is the most trusted agent isn't the one that's always right. It's just the one that doesn't always surprise. Like they always, you know, happiness is the delta between expectation and reality. One of the things we've learned is if you actually guide the user through creating some work output and then give them the tools to actually verify that work output, they have a lot more leniency for that agent and that AI. If you've heard of the IKEA effect, you know, IKEA effect is like, you know, when IKEA was first starting out, they built this like cult following by making the process of assembling furniture really delightful, like cool little drawings, real nice, you know, easy to assemble pieces, and that made people feel so much more responsible for the output and what they created because they had a hand in creating it. And so this is one misconception with legal, is like you always have to be right. It's like not the case. If you actually just give the levers, you give the transparency, you show the thinking, ask for input along the way, it's surprising how many times people are like, oh, sorry, like Harvey, like I meant this and not this. And I think we've kind of earned a lot of trust, you know, with that. And then of course we have things like, you know, online hallucination detection running on all our production queries, so we can kind of have stats and stuff to, you know, actually verify things are healthy and going well. But I think there's a lot of product kind of clever tricks and a lot of these like auto evals that you can end up doing. And then on the brand side, it's like, just talking about a lot of the stuff that we're doing. We regularly publish this thing called Big Law Bench, which is our evaluation benchmark, and customers love that. And we can verify, give them data sets. I think this is the one understated thing, because everyone's like, oh, product is going to win. It's like marketing and brand and who you partner with and what you show and transparency you show to your customers, especially enterprise buyers, actually goes a long way. And so continuing to do both in tandem, I think is paramount to succeeding.
Also, in traditional software, the concept of SLOs was invented over 20 years ago, right? Since then, SRE teams work with things like error budgets, because we've understood that 100% uptime goal or reliability goal is not really a goal, and you have to measure these things in number of nines and so on, right? And I think the same is true with agents, where you don't want to let perfect be the enemy of good. And so if things are going amiss and it might be one in 10,000 conversations or something like that, is it within bounds, right? You of course you don't want kind of trust-related or brand-related issue coming up, but maybe if the tone of the agent is slightly off, or maybe if it took a few milliseconds longer to speak than it should have, or something like that, maybe those things are okay. And as long as you're exposing that data, I think that just goes a long way, right? Understanding that it's hard for anything, especially non-deterministic pieces of software to be perfect.
Well said.
So I'll have some spicy questions, maybe we can cut them out. But what AI application categories besides your own are you bullish on, and which ones are you less optimistic about?
Maybe the easy answer for which ones I'm excited about are, all the different adjacencies to legal professional services. So things like accounting, things like insurance, things like, claims processing, where you need very deep domain knowledge and expertise, and where getting to the end value to the end customer, there's layers of enterprise people to go through and find. And I think those may seem unsexy or not really cool, but there's so much mundane work that happens in enterprises, and especially professional services, that no one wants to do. Investment banking, CFO suites, accounting. I think that's still underrated, and that's still very underdeveloped, where you just have a domain expert, you have an AI person, combine them together, and you can make a really insane demo that blows an enterprise buyer's mind, and suddenly you have your first customer. And so I think these kind of adjacencies to legal compliance is another exciting one, which most people think compliance is not exciting, to be ironic.
I think in terms of optimism, I think every job function, every vertical, I think there's room to kind of change how those operate and get rid of some of the menial tasks associated with that. Probably been said before, but I'm still very bullish on the entire coding category. I think the agents have the products around kind of the LLMs have come such a long way. And it's just it's taking a scarce resource and making it more abundant. So I'm super excited about that, and I've experienced the power of that on a daily basis. I think I'm happy to be less optimistic as well if you want.
Go for it.
I don't really know if this is a category or not, but I've seen a few products here and there where it's built for PMs, kind of taking feedback, synthesizing it, giving you insights and stuff. I'm not bullish, maybe because I am a PM, because I think it's going back to our previous discussion. There's just so much value in hearing things firsthand, asking follow-up questions, really internalizing some of the problems that your users are facing on a day-to-day. So I could never imagine kind of getting rid of that entire layer. I don't think it's menial work. I think it's core to the job.
Yeah, I think any product's automating VCs. It's just
right. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe what I'm less optimistic about is enterprise search and everything related to enterprise search of search Slack and Salesforce and Gong to find these insights, or do something create this report every day based on all the customer calls that have happened. I do think that I see infinite companies doing just here's enterprise search, and it's all the big players, that is where they're pouring their time with all the connections, integrations, all of that. That's OpenAI, Glean, Microsoft, Anthropic, and it may seem this way where you have an advantage if excited customer saying, "Hey, I love to use this to be my little chief of staff," or whatever. If you look out a year, even 2 years out, it's going to be basic functionality for any AI tool to search your enterprise context. Yeah, I think you do have to verticalize and focus on a specific like problem or user type, instead of just like, hey, we're gonna just solve everything for everyone by connecting to your company data.
Maybe to that end, you guys are both in categories that are really well funded and like very competitive, but I think respectively, both of your companies have been very much the market leader at this point. What do you think drives competitive advantage in like an AI world from like a product sense?
Yeah, this is a very VC question, but I love to answer it. I think a few things. So I think for us, Harvey specifically, I do think network effects actually will go a long way. Like, I alluded to this earlier, but we are starting to get into a world where law firms want to work with their clients inside of Harvey and vice versa. Like Fortune 500 companies are telling all of their law firms that, hey, we are using Harvey. We want everyone to use Harvey, and then we're gonna collaborate in Harvey on real deals. And we announced this last week, like a launch of Shared Spaces, which is this basically construct to allow that exactly to happen, like multiple parties coming together, working with Harvey's agents, and getting some work output. And especially for professional services and legal, I think that network effects and brand moat actually goes a long way. Like if you're buying a company and you're betting $80 billion that it's gonna work, you want to use the most effective tool for the job and not just another kind of long tail AI company. And so I think network effects actually go a long way, and maybe that's a little unique to our market, and trust goes a long way. And then the second thing is I think just enterprise data, maybe the most often cited one, but there is a lot of value. Like again, professional services and these firms, their data is locked away on an on-prem server somewhere in New York, like a closet in New York, and it's like, if AGI comes out tomorrow, it's not going to have access to that data. And so how can you get that access to data, build a trust so that people put it in your systems and then effectively use it to create organizational memory, to predict deals before they happen, and really use those insights that are locked away in that server room. And when I say server room, 50% of our customers are on-prem with their data. And so it really is like you have to go to the office and look at the room and do that. And so again, I think it's like you find these domains where that data is locked away. So yeah, I think network effects and data moats actually do go a long way for us.
That's cool. Would you agree with that, Sachi?
I think so. I think also for Sierra in particular, I think it just comes back to building really good like customer experience like through and through, right? So it's like not as like I would say like clear cut of an answer, but ultimately like our companies will be successful if their customers are happy and retained and are growing their kind of usage with the brand and so on. And that's what will also like does make us successful, right? And so just like being like super aligned with kind of like what are the most important problems, right? For like these like businesses that we're working with. And like honestly, the bigger the company, the bigger kind of like the set of problems. Like if you have tens of millions, hundreds of millions even of like users or subscribers, you can't kind of like actually go and like build relationships with each of them. So how do we even take that kind of like mindset of customer experience like truly to our agents and our relationships with these customers? So with things like memory and so on, like how do we go from kind of like treating the atomic unit of the entire like experience as like a conversation to like a relationship? Like you called yesterday and asked about something else, you've called today again, like how do I pick up from where we kind of like left off, build a relationship with you, proactively like reach out to you when there's something that might be like interesting or like, of concern to you and so on. And so kind of like really thinking about this, like everyone has their own like concierge kind of like model, and how do you kind of like take that to the extreme within the product? I think, and then, also these things like how do you show up for your customers and stuff, just like embodying really good like CX kind of like through the products, your relationships, and kind of just like all the way through. I think that just like ends up being like the most important thing. And if we can like, I think like what we do is like relentlessly, it's in our values, we relentlessly focus on that. And I think that works, yeah.
Yeah, I think just to add on to it, I do think it's like still understated how valuable like the user experience is. Sure, you can argue it's not like a structural moat in the long term, but if you're just delighting users like day in and day out, and their default choice is to go to Harvey or your product for accomplishing their task, it's like no matter what the enterprise buyer says, it's like they're not going to rip it out, because if like 99% of the users at that company really love your product, right? So it's not a structural thing, but I think really focusing on that end user experience does matter a lot.
It's also interesting to know that I think both of you guys, your companies, were first movers in your respective markets. I mean, open evidence and healthcare, like a bunch of the examples here. The first movers for the first time in a while seem to be the one winning. All right, guys, thanks so much.
Thank
This
you.
is awesome.
Thank you.